Welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television program for small businesses. We bring you the right information to empower you, the entrepreneur. Tonight on the show, a very special Diwali panel talking about what you, the entrepreneur, should know. Even as we're looking at demand, has demand really revived? We get you an in-depth picture into that from multiple industries, and we have a very special panel joining us tonight for that. Jheal, Madan, Sujay, thank you all very much for taking the time out tonight to join us here, talking really about Diwali, the upcoming festive season, and what entrepreneurs should keep in mind when it comes to this period, which is fantastic, of course, when it comes to consumer demand. My first question is to all of you on this panel, and I want to pick up the headlines from Nielsen's latest Global Consumer Confidence Survey. If you look at what happened in 2014, India was right at the top. But for 2018, we've slipped down to 130, and there's been no movement if you look at the first quarter of 2018 versus the last quarter of 2017. So there's been no movement. So my question to all of you on this panel is, where really we're at, what really is going on? It's clearly not boding well if you look at it in terms of consumer sentiment for the festive season. Let me come to you first.
So yeah, I've read the report. I know what you mean. I still think we're doing well, maybe not as well as we were at one point of time. Because of a bunch of different reasons. But I definitely think it's on the up and up. It's going to go up from now. We've had a little slump in the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years. But I think now it's going to pick up a little bit. And that should be great for the future.
Okay. Madan, of all of us, you perhaps have the most insight when it comes to what's going on in the economy. What really is happening?
No, actually, there's reason for us to be a bit sanguine about what's going to happen to consumer demand during this festival season, given the fact that in the last 2 years, we had similar expectations which did not quite materialize. We had demonetization, we had GST coming in. So the number of consumption patterns were really gotten affected. Now, fortunately, in this particular year, we do not have any major bold reform which has come in because it's a pre-election year. So there's reason for us to expect that maybe consumerism will really pick up this particular season. We have some news saying that the monsoon has been good, the Kharif harvest is fairly okay, so there could be some kind of rural demand coming in. But I think one should also be a bit guarded out here, because if you look at the 2 major sales which we had, the online sales which took place, it did give very good news that people are really spending a lot of money. But we have seen in the past that when people spend a lot when these online sales come because of the grand discounts which are offered, there's a case of phasing of consumption, which used to happen over a period of 4 months, tends to get concentrated in this 1 or 2 months period when we have these sales on. One can be positive about what's likely to happen this year. I think one should also be a bit guarded and wait and see in case this momentum is maintained for the next couple of months. Up to December is where one should be watchful. Okay,
so you're saying optimistic but with a pinch of salt.
Yeah. With respect to real estate, I think things are slightly better than what they were last year, for sure. Combined with both the factors, reduction in supply and slight increase in the demand. We've seen some of the reports, research reports that have come out in the last 3-4 months. It's very clearly says that aggregate level, the supply overhang is now down from 38 months to 34 months. If you leave aside the markets of Gurgaon and NCR, which are perennially kind of plagued with a lot of developer issues and all of that, all other 6 major markets of India, you have seen the supply reduced drastically from 28 months to 19 months.
This is as of 2018?
This is as of 2018, and I am benchmarking Navratri period, right? So therefore, critically, a healthy real estate market is when the residential supply overhang is between 12 to 14 months. So we are slowly seeing, I'm not saying it's only because of demand getting absorbed, while it has increased 11% year on year, but the supply has also contracted, which is driving the market towards an equilibrium.
Sure.
So definitely some amount of price correction, time correction, rationalization from developers, sizing, all of that, we have seen that the real estate market is now slowly, some green shoots are visible. Obviously, if the NBFC and all of those don't kind of snowball into a larger effect, we'll have a much better market going into the future.
Okay. My next question is, while all of you are sounding optimistic and saying, yes, demand is looking good, may not be fantastic, but it is definitely looking good. That same report, which is the Nielsen Global Consumer Confidence Survey, saying 59% of consumers that they have surveyed across APAC, excluding China, are saying that their country is in recession. So that again, on the other hand, would you take that as well with a pinch of salt? You're shaking your head. Okay.
Absolutely. See, we have seen in the last 2 years, the confidence comes directly from how much I am taking home. What is my confidence of my job getting, I will continue in my same job. So there has been some job losses in some sectors which we have seen in NPAs and recoveries and all of that. If you just see aggregate real estate, there have been job losses. There have been rationalization of salaries. So clearly, when it comes to at the aggregate level, we might have not moved on the index. But there are few other sectors which are kind of adding up the services, like Madan rightly pointed out, the entire e-commerce space, right? If you just look at real estate leasing, let's take Bangalore as a market, right? Bangalore leases out anywhere between 10 million to 14 million square feet every year. If you look at 2007, 80 to 90% of that leasing was done by the likes of TCS, Accenture and the likes, right? Today, 60% of the leasing is being done by e-commerce companies,
okay,
like Flipkart and all of them, right? So therefore, does it mean that if TCS and Infosys are not adding jobs, IT jobs are not growing? Clearly not. The roles have changed, the skills have changed. So the jobs are there, but they have migrated to a different pocket.
Sure, fair enough. I'm going to give you the chance to both of you to respond to that before I talk specifically about the retail and the e-commerce space with you, Jheal.
See, in fact, I have a slightly different view on employment because our own studies show that the growth in employment has been fairly sticky.
Sure.
We're talking of something like 3 to 4% growth in employment in the corporate sector. And I think all of us keep complaining, saying that our salaries are not increasing, we're not getting the kind of increments which we used to get earlier, which really means that our consumption power has gotten eroded over a period of time. So when we see that overall economic growth slows down in the economy, there's also a case of saying that enough jobs are not being created. And surprisingly, if you look at the public sector, you look at the government sector, even out there, if you see, there's been quite a bit of rationalization in terms of headcount.
Sure.
So when people retire, you're not really filling up those spaces. So I think that's something which has actually held back consumption in the past.
Reports suggesting that the liquidity crunch is still continuing in the market. Is that likely to hit festive sentiment and demand?
I am fairly confident it is going to hit it. Actually,
it
has already hit. If you look at just the real estate sector, we have seen instances where even a routine product like home loans not getting disbursed on time. The NBFCs, housing finance companies and others kind of holding up on the entire thing. So with the entire GST refund mechanism and all of that getting stuck, so it's not, the liquidity is really an end product, and with something like ILFS becoming a systemic issue, it just provides the market with that much more fodder. So how much time it will last, one doesn't know.
Sure.
But definitely that is a big factor right now.
Okay.
So I think there are 2 points here. One is, if you're looking at overall availability of liquidity, I think what the Reserve Bank of India has done has been very, very proactive. So in terms of making sure that the banking system has enough liquidity to play around with. Now, when you're talking of the issue of NBFCs, yes, I don't think I think it's very much endemic to a certain set of NBFCs. It's not something which is pervasive across the entire industry. That's what my belief is. And to the extent that some of the NBFCs are not in a position to lend, there is definitely a case of that kind of lending being substituted by banks.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a major issue. Of course, it's not easy also, because if you look at the banking system, we have around 11 banks which are under PCA, which means they are not in a position to lend. So therefore, there would be some kind of pressures. But I don't think this is going to have any kind of a negative impact in terms of overall spending, overall economic growth, given the kind of situation which we are assessed as of today.
Okay.
It could change, of course.
All right. So we've been talking about the economy on that very optimistic note. I'm going to take a very quick break. But on the other side, we're going to talk sector specific. We're also going to talk about rural demand, all that, much more coming up on the other side. Just stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight on the show, very special conversation on Diwali and festive demand for you, the SME entrepreneur. We have 3 special panelists breaking it down for you tonight. I want to come to you first, Jheal. We've been talking quite a bit about Flipkart and Amazon without perhaps making them out to be maybe the bad apples in the industry. I want to talk about Flipkart only because it is the largest player in the space. When we're talking about the retail space, their wholesale sales loss, I understand, has widened 9-fold. Their marketplace arm also is seeing quite a bit of a hit when it comes to its profits and its margins. If everything is going so well, if everyone is announcing these sales, if everyone is buying, where perhaps then is that mismatch happening?
I guess what we don't realize is the amount their expenditure is increasing, the amount their revenue is increasing. And when you compare it to all of that and see the amount of loss they've made and why, then that probably makes more sense to you in terms of looking at the numbers. So yes, as a number by itself, the Flipkart loss for their wholesale arm has been 9-fold, but for their retail, the loss is actually reduced. So at some point of time, it's going to even itself out. It's also got to do with the price war that happens between a lot of these big conglomerates in terms of trying to get as much of the market as they can. And in that entire process, of course, earlier we were talking about spending on advertisements, marketing, etc. A lot of that also attributes to the amount of loss that they make. So everybody is trying their level best in terms of making sure they're one step ahead of the competition and staying ahead. And in that entire scenario, I guess that's where you see the loss numbers. Okay. So as long as you go back and look at why they are happening, and as long as that's not very negative, which according to me isn't, I think in general, retail is doing pretty well. And as long as everybody evens out their numbers, eventually we should be okay.
Okay. What's your advice for an entrepreneur from the retail space who's watching this interview to talk about how standalone brands perhaps can hold their own against your big majors, against companies like yours that have been in this industry for a while?
Right.
What really is the future going to be? Is there going to be a lot of consolidation? It's getting more competitive. More and more companies are offering discounts.
Yes, it's definitely getting very, very competitive in this space. And I think unless you have something which is very unique, like we at the Stylease do a very unique model. We offer high-end designer clothes at 10% of the retail price. We ship pan-India for free. We do customized fittings for free. It's stuff like that that creates a very unique experience for our consumers. And as long as you create that very unique experience, you don't have to worry about the really big conglomerates, the amount of money they're spending, exactly the kind of stuff that they're doing within their space. Because you need to make sure that you're different in what you do. And that's the only reason your consumers will come back to you.
Sure.
And the reason people, like for example, Flipkart versus Amazon, the reason why there's no clear winner is because a lot of them are doing the exact same thing, just doing it slightly differently, which really isn't anything that interests the consumer. So if you are a small brand or if you are somebody who is just starting out, then you need to find your voice, you need to find what you want to do, what you want to build, stick to it, and make sure that that does really well for you. Find that niche that does really well for you. And don't worry so much about competing where you get lost in the market and what you're trying to do.
Sure. Speaking of discounts, the real estate space does see quite a bit, but with the introduction of RERA, how have things really sort of changed over the past couple of months? What sort of impact is that having on the festive demand?
Oh, RERA has impacted real estate extremely positively, and especially from a consumer mindset, it has brought about standardization, and that one belief which is now slowly getting ingrained into the customers is that whatever money I am paying towards my apartment or office or space is not, someone is there who is monitoring it. So it's not at the discretion of just the developer. So from a perspective of discipline, standardization, oversight, all of that, it has had impact, extremely positive impact on the consumer demand.
So this is a question now to all of you on this panel, but I want to come to you first on this, Madan, and I want to talk about rural demand, both semi-urban and rural demand, in fact, to bring in both Sujay as well as Jheal into this conversation. It's always said that rural demand is a real indication of demand for any particular country, any particular season. What has that been like? Monsoons, reports are suggesting, have been fairly good. Correct me if I'm wrong. So is that an indication of perhaps also how broad-based this demand is?
See, normally when you talk of monsoon, you look at the headline number and say, okay, it's close to normal, so therefore it's a good monsoon. But then it depends upon the distribution, what really happens to agricultural output, and which crops do well, which don't do well, and finally what is the income which the farmer receives. So we have a kind of fairly mixed kind of picture. And as I mentioned earlier, we're already seeing that number of prices of these commodities are actually ruling less than the minimum support price, which means farmers are getting a much lower price, which is going to affect their spending power in this particular season. Sure. Now, the rural demand becomes important, but actually agriculture is a very small part of the economy, 14–15%. But it becomes very critical because not only does it affect the inputs of other industries which use agricultural crops, but also the industries, the products on which the rural people spend have very strong backward linkages. And the third part is in terms of prices. Because in case I have higher prices for agricultural products, in the past we have seen households have to tend to spend more on food items and they have less money for discretionary spending. In the current year, given the fact that prices are lower, maybe the farmers are at a disadvantage, it could be a positive, a negative positive for the rest of the households, where I keep spending less money on food and I have more money to spend for discretionary items. And that's why I see that this could be possibly a positive sign for overall consumerism, where the rural economy feeds into the urban economy, which leads to higher growth.
Very interesting. My last question to all of you on this panel, and I want to really talk about this fight between the online and the offline space. Now, even as your offline stores, brands, etc., are offering massive discounts, you have online players who are offering things like customized sales, which I understand are like, your $1 billion sales, your ₹1 sales, etc., that are happening online. How is this trend really going to pan out? For an entrepreneur who's watching this interview, what would you like to leave them with in terms of perhaps where they should be spending their time, energy, money, what markets they should be looking at?
In fact, I think any SME today who is dealing with the consumer should be jumping onto the e-tailing bandwagon. The reason being that you get a much wider canvas of customers. Today, if I'm located in place A, my customers are only in place A. Whereas today, I'm able to reach out to the entire country thanks to the Flipkarts and Amazons. Sure. So I think that's what the message is. And I think wherever you're B2C kind of business, this is the right way to go. That's the only way you can get volumes.
Okay.
I think we have seen enough electronic disruption in the e-commerce and retail space. So I think real estate is an industry which very soon is going to see what online technology disruption is going to be. Okay. Because that is something where...
And not just the listing
Not just the listing, not just the listing. Listing addresses, there were exhibitions in earlier times. So that's the online classified version, like Times runs classifieds. So the online classified version is the listing portal. But if there is one industry that is likely to be the next biggest thing as far as technology disruption goes, it is going to be real estate.
Sure.
And we have seen that in some developed markets where by real value, like if you just see Airbnb, right, what it has done, it has just disrupted the entire hospitality industry by not necessarily taking over the space that is occupied by hotels, but by creating its own niche. Similarly, we see real estate, it's extremely fragmented. There's big difference, trust deficit that exists between current players and the customers, fragmented balance sheets, everything that is just ripe for some new technology disruption in the development space.
Sure.
So taking from that, I think retail is the best example of technology disruption. I think that's where a lot of it started. And that's doing better. We've seen a shift within our own business in online versus offline, where earlier offline was still a very heavy market in terms of people still wanting to touch and feel products. Now everybody is totally okay with buying toothpaste from Amazon or going and buying capsicum from Amazon, which to me is still very surprising. But that shift is definitely happening. A lot of people are doing very well, getting on that bandwagon. I agree, everybody should totally get on that in terms of moving towards e-commerce or at least having an online presence to be able to target more people. So that's definitely the way to go for the future.
Madan, Sujay, Jheal, thank you all very much for your time here tonight to really sort of break it down for our viewers in terms of what to expect this time around. Thanks for taking the time. Wish all of you and your families a very happy Diwali.
Thank you.
That was our special panel discussion on Diwali for you, the SME entrepreneur. If you have any feedback for us, here's how you get in touch. leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com is our email ID. On social media, tweet at me at Sunanda_J or LOT_ET now. You can also get in touch with us on our Facebook page, Leaders of Tomorrow on ET Now. Thanks for watching. As always, love hearing from you. Good night.
Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Government of India invites you to nominate small and big, illustrious young entrepreneurs and dedicated individuals and organizations who support these entrepreneurs for the country's most prestigious National Entrepreneurship Award 2018. The ministry will give out awards in 43 specially designed categories, 39 for young entrepreneurs and 4 for entrepreneurship ecosystem builders, with a whopping 2.3 crore rupees in prize money. Individuals or enterprises a prize of 5 lakh rupees and winning organizations will get prize money of 10 lakh rupees. Eligibility criteria includes nominee must be under 40 years of age, nominee must be a first-generation entrepreneur, nominee must hold 51% or more equity and ownership of business. Nominate by November 16th at www.neas.gov.in.